بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الحمد لله نحمده تعالى ونستهديه ونستعينه، ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فهو المهتد، ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. وعلى بركة الله نبدأ. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين، اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. بسم الله.
Barakallah feek. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. Welcome to the Scholar Series of GAIS. This is number 4 in our series, and our honored guest today is Dr. Amaarah DeCuir. I have the pleasure of introducing her. She is an educator, a researcher, an inclusive pedagogy fellow. She's a faculty member at American University, the School of Education, and an executive board member at the Center for Islam in the Contemporary World at Shenandoah University. Her scholarship spans the areas of anti-racist pedagogy, Muslim student experiences, prophetic pedagogy, faith erasure, equity, anti-racism, and social justice. Education leadership, teacher education, and faculty development. Dr. DeCuir has published articles and chapters in peer-reviewed journals and books, and her public scholarship appears in news and media outlets. A highly regarded educator and facilitator, Dr. DeCuir teaches education studies in social justice, education leadership, and teaches an anti-racist research methods course that she co-designed. She brings over 20 years of teaching and leadership experiences from public and private K-12 schools to inform her current work in higher education. And I have had the pleasure of listening to her at conferences several times and find her work fascinating. And she's one of my mentors, one of the people that actually I cited repeatedly throughout my work when I was doing my research. Welcome, Dr. DeCuir, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was such a kind and generous introduction, Leila. It's a pleasure to be in this space with all of you this morning or afternoon or evening, wherever you all are dialing in from. I'm going to share my screen, and please do holler if there's anything on here that is not showing up clearly. So for my comments this morning, I'd like to focus on the topic of Islamic leadership. And when I think about what our society is being challenged with today, what are the concerns of people, Muslims and people who are not Muslim? It's very clear to me that our society is plagued with inequities and injustices. We see it around us. I do my work, my scholarship in America, and it is very clear that the burdens that Americans are carrying today, the burdens of fear, the burdens of pain, the burdens of national grief that Americans are managing today and have been managing for years and decades are due to the inequities and the injustices that are deeply rooted in our American society. And although there are many viable solutions to bringing our nation and our world even back into order, back into balance, today I'd like to frame just one of those solutions as a solution of leadership, particularly Islamic leadership. Because what we need today most urgently in our day and age is equity and justice. And to be very clear, this is not going to be a conversation on Islamic administration. We're not going to be speaking about how does one administer over a school or a Muslim organization. We're not going to be speaking about Islamic management. How do you simply manage people or resources in a school or another Muslim institution? And we're not going to be engaging in that firefighter metaphor of how to figure out which fires are burning most urgently and which ones you can put on the back burner. What's a short-term goal? What's a strategic goal? We're truly speaking today about leadership, the work that it takes to command an organization, to set direction, to create a community of followers, and to build a community of supporters where one can truly lead an organization. So let me start with some acknowledgements before I get too far into this. Let me start by acknowledging and deeply appreciating the Global Association of Islamic Schools. This is a new effort, and I'm truly excited to see this launch at this particular time. It is going to deeply benefit the Islamic schools, their leaders, their educators, and their families here in the United States of America. But because it's a global association, it is reminding all of us, particularly those of us tasked with leading Muslim schools, it reminds us that our work is shared. Our challenges are shared, our successes are shared, and there's so much that we can learn from one another. Our boundaries are truly non-important at this day and age. And what we can learn from one another as a global community of Muslims on this shared path is deeply powerful. So I appreciate GAIS for pulling us together this morning and for the work that they're going to continue to do on our behalf. I would also like to acknowledge and appreciate the Center for Islam in the Contemporary World. This is a center where I serve as an executive board member. I've been a part of this organization for a little over 4 years now. And the work and the collaboration that takes place within this center has deeply impacted me and my research by giving me a platform to be in dialogue with others who are truly looking to advance Islam, Islamic studies, and the needs and the priorities of Muslims in today's world, with a heavy emphasis on practice. Our center supports research, scholars, and practitioners more broadly. And so I invite many of you who are unfamiliar with the center to look us up online. We're at contemporaryislam.org. We have a lot of exciting projects coming out of our center. One that I think will speak to many of the interests in this group is our prophetic pedagogy project. I'm part of that team, and our goal is to provide teacher development and also leadership development for those who are seeking to do their work in their Muslim schools under the practices of our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. I also want to acknowledge the work of the Cambridge Dialogues under the powerful leadership of my colleague, Dr. Fada Ahmed. This is an international global organization of Muslim scholars who have been coming together for about 2 years now to define and describe Islamic education and how it can be applied in our contemporary world. This space has been a beautiful space of collegiality, collaboration, and has truly affirmed my commitment to continue research in this space. I always give support and acknowledgement to my home institution, American University, where I'm a faculty member in the School of Education, where my teaching and my service and my research has created the space for me to do the work that I'm presenting to you today. And I have deep appreciation for 13 Muslim women who are leading or were leading American Islamic schools during the year 2013. 13 Muslim women who answered the call to participate in my research study so many years ago. Their words, their practices, their advice is what is the foundation of my presentation today. Islamic leadership for equity and justice as embodied through Muslim women in positions of Islamic school leadership. So today, what I'd like to do is to move through 3 key parts of this agenda and provide some descriptions and context along the way. We'll start by defining anti-racism and naming the racisms that are impacting our community. And then I'd like to discuss both the Quran foundations and the Sirah foundations that give us a strong understanding of equity and justice and our obligations to lead in these concepts. And then I'd like to present an Islamic leadership framework. How can we lead our Muslim organizations, particularly our schools, in order to advance the equity and the justice that we so deeply need in our society? That framework is going to include resistance, transformation, disruption, and faith. And then I'd like to close with some recommendations for practice, how we can bring this to life in our current situations. So anti-racism, my slide is clear. Anti-racism is not a 21st century call to action. You know, in today on our bookshelves, across Amazon, these first two images that you see here are going to be very popular choices for people who look up what is anti-racism. Ibram Kendi, the author of the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist, defines anti-racism in his book as someone who is expressing an anti-racist idea or supporting an anti-racist policy with their actions. And I define an anti-racist idea as any idea that says the racial groups are equal. Annalise Singh, the author of the Racial Healing Handbook, defines the term anti-racist as people who are actively seeking not only to raise their consciousness about race and racism, but also to take action when they see racial power inequities in everyday life. And then the image on the right is an example of so many of the anti-racist trainings that we're seeing coming up in our American society recently. These authors, these trainings suggest that what is known about anti-racism is a modern concept, that these are new ideas in the field that need to be documented today. And they fail to articulate that anti-racism is an age-old foundation. And in fact, it is a foundation deeply rooted in the Quran and the Sunnah. One of my mentors, Dr. Aziza Al-Hibri, a female American Muslim legal scholar, asserted that the centerpiece of the Islamic worldview is adala, or divine justice. That's the centerpiece of our faith, justice. And when we read the Quran, we see that the Quran is full of parables of justice, commandments to advance equity, and prohibitions against injustice. We know that the Quran was revealed during a period fraught with racism, gender bias, and social marginalization. The Quran offers a social treatise of anti-racism that is defined and communicated to all people across time and place. And we know that the Sunnah, the Sirah, the guidance, the life of our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, represents the preserved Quran in action. It is attributed by his wife, Aisha, peace and blessings be upon her, that the character of the Messenger of Allah was the Quran. So we know that the values and the life actions that he embodied reflect the living example of the Quran. So what I want to name for us today is to be clear for us as Muslims, anti-racism is not a 21st century call to action. It is deeply rooted in our Islamic faith. It is embedded in the Quran and the Sunnah, and it offers perennial definitions, values, and commandments that we need to address the inequities and the injustices that are plaguing America and our global community today. And there are two very prominent racisms that are impacting our Muslim community. The first is anti-Black racism. Anti-Black racism has been present in our global society since the time Africans were legally enslaved on this continent. It persisted through the period known as Jim Crow laws after enslavement was abolished, but when legal segregation and state-sanctioned violence were embedded in codes, policies, and laws in our country. And it exists today. When we look at statistics of African-American, Black Americans that are subjected to disproportionate police violence, when we look at the rates of poverty that are impacting our Black American community, when we look at the Black American children in our public schools who have disproportionate under-resourced schools that are in their neighborhoods. Anti-Black racism has been in this country, on this soil, for hundreds and hundreds of years. We do see state-sanctioned violence as an embodiment of anti-Black racism. And we see the social inequities that are plaguing the Black American community as an embodiment of anti-Black racism. And because we know that Muslims in America include Black and African Americans, anti-Black racism impacts what is understood as 1/3 of the Muslim community in America. Anti-Muslim racism, less discussed in public spaces, also impacts our Muslim community. Anti-Muslim racism dates back to large efforts across the globe of the expansion of empire and colonial powers on Muslim lands. We first identified this as Islamophobia, a fear of Muslims that goes back to the Middle Ages. Today, in a post-9/11 context, we recognize this as anti-Muslim racism because we see how it moves through policies, practices, and beliefs in our larger society, no longer limited to the fear of individuals for fear of the other. Anti-Muslim racism is an active form of racism that seeks to oppress and marginalize and silence Muslim voices and Muslim bodies in this post-9/11 context. We see state-sanctioned violence across the world, in China's forced labor camps for Uyghur Muslims, in India's restrictions on Muslims in Kashmir, Burma's genocide of Muslim Rohingya, in the civil assaults in France on its Muslim immigrants, or in America in our earlier iterations of what we called loosely the Muslim ban. Domestically, we have many examples of Muslims experiencing anti-Muslim racism. Many of them are often communicated through anecdotes that move within our communities. Some have begun to document hate crime incidents. The federal government, the Institute for Social Policy and Understanding, CARE. Less may be documented about the pervasiveness of anti-Muslim racism, but we do know that this exists and Muslims are deeply impacted. Racism, whether it is anti-Black racism or anti-Muslim racism, both exists within our Muslim community and it exists as external pressures bearing down on our Muslim community. It is for these racisms that we need Islamic leadership that promotes equity and justice. So let's look at the Muslim schools in America. This is where I have done my research. This is where I've dedicated 15 years of my life when I was both a vice chair and then later a school principal for Al-Fatih Academy, one of the Muslim schools in America located here in Northern Virginia. Many families in America choose Muslim schools for their children for a variety of reasons. Some make decisions because of the Islamic curriculum. Others claim it's the Muslim environment. Others may say it's an act of resistance against the public school experience. Some parents see that the pursuit of knowledge for the sake of Allah is a faith imperative. And others named that the pursuit of knowledge becomes an act of social justice because the knowledge impacts the larger community, So when we learn together in Muslim communities, we deeply impact the justice and the equity experienced in our Muslim communities. In America, the earliest iterations of Muslim schools in this land are from the Claire Muhammad schools. Claire Muhammad schools date back to 1931 in Detroit, Michigan, started by Sister Claire Muhammad. The image that you see on the screen is an image from a Claire Muhammad school in Washington, D.C., taken more recently. It comes from an article I authored in the Washington Post a few months ago, outlining the history of Claire Muhammad and the Claire Muhammad schools, where we see that this set of schools was developed to confront anti-Black racism. It produced its own curriculum, its own pedagogical framework that positively affirmed the identities and the intellectual capacities of its students. When the community was deeply entrenched in anti-Black racism in Detroit, particularly in the Detroit public schools and in the local society under the shadow of Jim Crow laws, the Claire Muhammad schools became a site for the advancement of equity and justice. It was a place where we were dismantling anti-Black racism within the school space. Claire Muhammad schools grew into a national network of over 41 independent schools across America, mostly located in cities, urban areas with strong Black community presence. In 1965, after the Immigration and Nationalization Act was passed in America, the American Muslim community grew exponentially with the import of Muslim immigrants from Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and North Africa. And as these immigrants established communities in our nation, they often built Muslim schools. And an example of such is the middle image that you see on the screen. This is Brighter Horizons campus in North Texas, an example of a Muslim school that we have here in America. And the image that you see on the right was actually taken at Al-Fatih Academy, my former institution. This is an example of one of our kindergarten assistant teachers working with a student. But these images represent the Muslim schools that have been born in our country after 1970 in communities that serve diverse representations of Muslim communities. Their curriculum, their pedagogy, and their focus for existing serves to create a space where children and students can be free of anti-Muslim racism. Their goal and their purpose is to advance equity and justice on behalf of the larger Muslim American community. We know this to be true. We know this to be a foundation of our leadership and our work because of the Quran. Let's look at a few of the verses of the Quran that will help to ground how equity and justice is not simply something kind or nice to do, but something that is demanded upon us by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by God himself. The first quote that I have here comes from the 4th chapter titled The Woman, verse 135, where the quote reads, "O ye who believe, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even as against yourselves or your parents or your kin, and whether it be against rich or poor, for Allah can best protect both. Follow not the lusts of your hearts, yes, you swerve. And if you distort justice or decline to do justice, verily Allah is well acquainted with all that you do." In this verse, we begin by understanding that the call to advance justice and equity is a call to those who have attained faith, which is a critical distinction, that this work is to be regarded as an embodiment of faith in God. And it continues by commanding us to stand out firmly for justice, which implies action over a more passive acknowledgement of justice. Even if standing out for justice goes against your family or your community. And the verse disrupts any assumptions that justice should be weighed by a person's social or economic status, and instead reminds us that God's justice protects us all. The second quote reads, O ye who believe, stand out firmly for God as witnesses to fair dealing, and let not the hatred of others to you make you swerve to wrong and depart from justice. Be just, that is next to piety, and fear God, for God is well acquainted with all that you do. Again, from this ayah, we see very clearly that we are commanded to enact fairness and justice, irregardless of what others may think about us, irregardless if we feel we're subjected to hate, that justice is what is next to piety. And this is what we are all seeking, the pleasure of Allah. The third quote from the Quran, chapter 30, ayah 22 reads, and among his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth, and the variations in your languages and your colors. Verily, and that are signs for those who know. This reminds us very clearly to repudiate any attempt that colors and distinctions between us are to be associated with supremacy. It reminds us that the creation of us in our variations is to remind us of the diversity that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us to coexist with. And we also know that the Quran includes narratives of our prophets, like Prophet Abraham, Moses, and Jesus, who led their communities towards faith. The quote that we see on the lower left side reminds us, as we have sent our messengers to humanity with clear miraculous proofs so that people might establish justice in the earth. It reminds us that all the messengers of Allah have reminded us how to establish justice. This is critical to our being as Muslims and is deeply embedded in our imperative for leadership. And we also have foundations that come from the Sirah. And the Sirah represents the lived experiences, words, and practices of our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. There are many words and phrases and attributes that have been named in the Sirah that can describe how our beloved Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, embodied equity and justice. I'd like to name only one in this moment, which comes from his final sermon, where there are two key portions that provide a very clear and poignant direction for why equity and justice are obligatory for us as Muslims and grounding us as Muslim leaders. The first is a principle of restorative justice. And the quote reads, "O people, just as you regard this month, this day, this city as sacred, so regard life and property of every Muslim as a sacred trust. Return the goods entrusted to you to their rightful owners. Treat others justly so that no one would be unjust to you. Remember that you will indeed meet your Lord and that he will indeed reckon your deeds. God has forbidden you to take usury, therefore all usury obligations shall henceforth be waived. Your capital, however, is yours to keep. You will neither inflict nor suffer inequity." This reminds us how justice is to be established through the practice of restorative justice, restoring equity, restoring what is fair to those who have shared, to those who have experienced a loss in our society. His words in that last sermon also named for us the foundations of what we need to know to disrupt supremacy as we see it exhibited in our day to day. The quote attributed is, "All mankind is from Adam and Eve. An Arab has no superiority over a non-Arab, nor a non-Arab has any superiority over an Arab. Also, white has no superiority over a black, nor black has any superiority over white. except by piety and good action. Learn that every Muslim is a brother to every Muslim, and that the Muslims constitute one brotherhood. Although this was spoken over 1400 years ago, the power of this message is still relevant and urgent to us then as it is today, that we must disrupt supremacy, particularly when it is expressed as racial supremacy of one group over another. Now, what I want to name in this space is that concepts of equity and justice and realities of inequity and injustice are not hypothetical to our Muslim community, and they are not theoretically associated with our Muslim schools, particularly as we experience them in this country. In fact, leaders of American Muslim schools are tasked with disrupting inequities and disrupting injustices every day that they lead in their Muslim schools. And what's powerful is that the Muslim women who participated in my study named exactly how they advance equity and justice. And I'd like to name this as a framework so that as we are developing our leadership capacities in our own institutions, particularly within our schools, we have clear guidance on how we can advance equity and justice within our Muslim school community and to impact our larger Muslim community more broadly. And please, let us not let it go unnoticed that these leadership practices are embodied, envisioned, and lived through the life experiences of Muslim women. We can talk about that for a long time, how beautiful it is that these are women leading our Muslim institutions. So let's first talk about resistance. This is one attribute of Islamic school leadership, is to lead a school community to demonstrate resistance against any embodiment of racism. And we know this is essential because it comes from our prophetic seerah, from our beloved prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, where this obligation is translated as, whoever of you sees an evil must then change it with his hand. If he is not able to do so, then he must change it with his tongue. And if he is not able to do so, then he must change it with his heart. And that is the slightest of faith. So one way that the women leading American Muslim schools embody resistance against anti-Muslim bias, this narrow defined social expectation assigned to Muslim women that we must be quiet, subservient, and weak. The sole presence of Muslim women at the head of our Muslim schools resists that anti-Muslim bias. They demonstrate through their words and their leadership that they are going to resist being boxed into that narrow conceptualization of what is a Muslim woman. One leader named in my study that she volunteers for public speaking engagements in her local community in order to resist this bias that Muslim women can't contribute meaningfully to public discourse. The school leaders in my study also describe that their leadership leads their school community to demonstrate resistance against multiple types of racism and injustice in their local area. One school was victimized by an act of anti-Muslim arson. All right, so that's fire that destroyed a significant portion of their school building. In this case, the leader helped stand in front of the local opposition on the construction of the new school site. Many, particularly immigrant Muslims, may tend to shy away from civic engagement because they may be unsure how to engage effectively in the American democratic system. But these American Muslim school leaders fostered a climate of community and civic engagement, not just for themselves as individuals, but through their school community. They created experiential learning opportunities, for students and teachers to advance social justice in their local community. One school leader led the school to adopt a local highway and maintain it and clean it to promote environmental awareness. Another school leader encouraged their school families to speak out at local government meetings and to demonstrate against acts of racial injustice. So where others may emphasize the importance of standardizing academic content, these school leaders were prioritizing civic engagement to both disrupt anti-Muslim racism and to advance social justice. And they referred to the leadership practices of our beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, as their motivator for engaging in resistance. The second attribute of their work is described as transformation. This focus to transform and to change systems, practices, and beliefs when they poorly and unfairly reproduce inequities and injustices. We know that the embodiment of equity and justice is our Muslim paradigm. And what these leaders describe is that when they joined as a leader in their school, they looked at the policies and practices that were creating inequities and they sought to transform them. One leader decided that she was going to prioritize consensus building. She did not want to lead as an authoritarian leader in a manner that may have been modeled in the past. She wanted to transform leadership to be collaborative and to focus on building consensus. Others wanted to address conflict through new conflict mediation systems in their schools. Again, transforming practices and beliefs. Other leaders wanted to center social emotional priorities. You know, we have too much focus in our larger education space of standardized tests and standardized test scores. And these leaders were focusing on the social emotional needs of their students and their teachers. Some leaders talked about creating a fair, comfortable work environment where they could reflect how they could transform work priorities to support the teachers being both family members, spouses, and active community leaders, as well as part of the school community by adjusting work schedules and work responsibilities. Another leader shared that her common practice was learning the names of all the students, getting to know their families intimately to be able to better serve them and better meet their needs. Because when we know the social emotional needs of the ones we are serving, we can transform our leadership to be truly impactful and advance the social justice and equity that is deeply relevant to the community that we are serving. The third aspect of this framework is disruption and a focus on disrupting school-based inequities, particularly ending preferential treatment. One leader named that she had noticed that her school had exclusionary discipline practices that were unfairly targeting an African-American girl, a young girl. And so she sought to first make those inequities visible to the rest of her staff, and then create an alternative plan to support that young child in the classroom, particularly using self-soothing techniques. Another leader began to observe other classroom teachers more effectively to better understand how they were enacting discipline and learning opportunities in their particular classroom. And when a school leader became aware that there was a policy to line up students outside the principal's office whose tuition payments were late and publicly humiliate them for their parents' oversight of not paying tuition on time, the leader immediately eliminated that process as an act of justice and equity for the young children from families who were struggling with economic challenges at the time. Many school leaders found that in their school, there were expectations and assumptions of preferential treatment, sometimes because of a family's race, ethnicity, or country of origin, sometimes because of a family's assumed wealth or social connections in the Muslim community. Either way, these leaders felt that this was a reproduction of a supremacist culture that does not reflect the tenets of Islam. And so they would confront families and sometimes students to enforce school policies fairly, refusing to accept gifts or requests for differential treatment. It was challenging and caused them to have to go against sometimes their own family, friends, and close relationships. But as we saw in an earlier ayah from the Quran, this may be what is necessary to disrupt inequities. And lastly, but most importantly, these women led through faith. They described their faith as the embodiment of their personal relationship to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to God Almighty. They felt that their faith was a manifestation of their leadership priorities. Their faith motivated their leadership work. Their faith enabled them to recognize inequities and injustices. And because their faith continues to be challenged in the public square, their commitment to faith-based leadership is understood as a rebuke of anti-Muslim racism. Many leaders felt that their faith constructs their leadership and their pedagogical frameworks in their school, and they show themselves as role models to young children and to the community at large through the association of their faith and leadership. Again, let it be very clear that these are women leading these American Muslim schools through my study, through where these findings originate. And as community leaders showing up as Muslim women, they accept that their unique position becomes a role model for the integration of faith and leadership. So I'd like to name some recommendations of how we can take this framework forward to make it be realized across all of our Muslim schools and Muslim institutions more broadly. One, we need to embody a dual commitment to dismantle both anti-Black and anti-Muslim racism. They coexist within our Muslim community, and they are pressures bearing down upon our Muslim community. And we need leaders in our schools that are willing to dismantle these racisms so that our communities can experience equity and justice. We also need to disrupt patriarchy because it limits women's ability to lead in community spaces. We need to prioritize leader development. This includes not just the one who is tasked with being the leader of the school, but it also includes the board that serves to support the leader so that the board understands that the leader's goals to advance equity and justice are deeply relevant to the long-term success and sustainability of that school. We need evaluation and assessment measures for leaders that measure their attempts to disrupt inequity, to transform justice, and to embody anti-racist leadership within their school. We need more scholars and practitioners to contribute to Islamic interpretations of modern applications of the Quran and the Sunnah. We know that the experiences of being minoritized communities in a post 9/11 context is unique to our day and age, but our foundations are time eternal. And lastly, we need communities to validate the leadership of Muslim women. We need communities to recognize that women are charting a path in our Muslim schools to advance equity and justice in a way that is deeply powerful and deeply relevant to the needs of our larger community. So I named this framework as an Islamic anti-racist school leadership framework, one that best represents the integration of the Quran and the Sunnah, and one that can enhance a school and a school organization broadly, both the people, the practices, and the policies that are grounded within that school. And it is truly Islamic because it is grounded in foundations of the Quran and the Sunnah. The image that you see here on this slide is an image from one of our earliest prophetic pedagogy trainings, where we began to articulate what it means to be an Islamic school leader and what it means to prioritize the advancement of equity and justice. So let me pause here, and I will stop sharing my screen and ask my dear colleague and friend, Sister Sufia, were there any comments, questions, conversations that emerged through the group that we can entertain?
Thank you so much, Dr. Amaarah. Really grateful for the time that you gave us. I think everyone was so engrossed and just focused on listening to what you had to say, that study that you talked about and so forth. So we don't have specifically in the chats, but I know that Brother Idris would like to either ask or say something. So please go ahead, Brother Idris.
Assalamu alaikum. Firstly, to my beloved sister Amaarah, thank you for such a beautiful, articulate presentation. And in my experience, I've come across two things. That whenever the media attacks us as Muslims for treatment of our women, we are very quick to quote the Quran and share the beautiful example of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Yet in reality, there is this disconnect between what we're supposed to believe in and what we practice on the one hand. And on the second level, in terms of schools, I had the good fortune, alhamdulillah, of going to many schools. And when I engage our daughters there at the school, they often say to me that why is it that the boys appear to get preferential treatment? And the idea of fighting against or challenging this patriarchy is something that is so fundamental. So I want to say to you, Jazakumullah, for reminding us of what we're supposed to be doing. Inshallah, I pray that whoever listens to what you've got to say, in fact, you are really quoting the Quran and the beautiful example of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Jazakumullah. That's what I thought I'll share with you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, Dr. Amaarah, from the study that you conducted, the research you did, the women that you spoke to in positions of leadership at schools, I know you also have experiences outside of that specific study. I know you're familiar with a lot of the schools all over the country in the US. I don't know about overseas, but what do you see as one of the biggest barriers at our Islamic schools to be able to, to advance equity and do this work that you're talking about? What are the barriers?
Thank you. That's a great question. One barrier is awareness. I do not think that in our Muslim communities, we are open to the awareness that racism exists within our Muslim spaces. In this country, particularly in the summer of 2020, after the murder of George Floyd, America went through a short-lived period of racial reckoning, where people across the United States of America began to question the presence of racism in our daily lives and in our society broadly. And I know that there were many Muslim masjids and school communities and institutions that also tried to use that summer to initiate conversations about race and racism. But like the larger part of American society, those conversations began to dwindle out like a candle eventually burns out. I know that there are still many Muslims, particularly Black American Muslims, that feel as if within the Muslim spaces, within Muslim institutions, they are constantly subjected to anti-Black racism that is both invalidated and unseen and unspoken within our Muslim spaces. Those realities show up in our schools. Those realities create harms and injustices for children and for their families and for our larger community. So I think our largest obstacle is to recognize that there are issues of inequity and injustice that need to be fought and disrupted within our schools, just as there are issues of inequity and injustice bearing down on our school communities. So I'm hoping that our community can begin to discuss, to share, to talk, and to raise awareness so that we can mobilize forces to recognize that this is urgent and necessary in order for our communities, both in America and more broadly, to be able to thrive.
Thank you. There's Majida, Sister Majida, would you like to have something? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yes, just reflecting on the wonderful comments of Sister Amaarah and the points that she made in regards to this framework. I think for Muslim schools, in regards to sometimes what Black children experience in the schools, when we address issues, it can't be a pit stop or one-stop shop. It has to be intrinsically intertwined and inserted into the curriculum as a continuum, because a lot of times we are reactionary. Sister Amaarah, Dr. Amaarah quoted a lot of Quranic verses. And so if this is something that is embedded into what we do on a daily basis, inshallah, we will help to solve many of the issues that we see that might be pervasive in some schools more than others, to help to correct these things that we are noticing, as opposed to just responding with activities, have things heavily embedded into our curriculum that address these issues in our schools so we can be better Muslims and really submitting to the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Shukran.
Thank you, Sister Majida. I fully agree. Embedding in the curriculum as long-term plans is essential. I would also name that it needs to be embedded in our policies so that it impacts our faculty, our staff, and our leadership, who are also subjected to inequities and injustices within our schools or larger Muslim communities. So we need workplace policies. We need policies on how we are going to work collaboratively within our Muslim organizations so that we can truly allow the Quran and the Sunnah to ground how we experience and express equity and justice within our school spaces.
Yes, thank you for that. And thank you for the two really important things that I just took away from the two comments from Sister Majda and from you, Dr. Amaarah. The embeddedness piece, so important for that. And then embedding not only in the curriculum, in the programs, in the practices of the school, the policies and procedures, right? To make sure that all of this is deliberate and intentional, what we're doing, not just being reactive, but being proactive. And some of us on this in this call right now may have been at the previous Scholar Series session where Dr. Aida spoke about, boards, about Islamic organizational boards and Islamic school boards, and the fact that was brought up at the end of that session that board members tend to be mostly male. Right? We don't see a lot of women on the boards, on the Islamic school boards. Some, yes, but very few. So we have to go to that level as well to make sure there's awareness and there's embeddedness in terms of the equity piece, anti-Muslim, anti-Black, and then anti-women, right? So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Can we address a comment that's in the chat?
Sure, go ahead.
So Sister Leila, recommendations for curriculum samples for anti-racism. No, I don't have any recommendations. I'd be curious to see if others in the group have found curriculum that they felt was reflective of anti-racist tenets that promoted equity and justice for all students. And then Sister Salma put in the chat that part of the difficulty of women to implement much of the restorative justice and equity is due to authoritarian nature and patriarchy, particularly in our school boards and with male leaders. I believe this is changing, she says, but do we think it should be challenged or should we exercise summer? I 100% believe it should be challenged. sabr comes while we are working to disrupt and to transform and to resist. But sabr does not mean simply waiting on the side passively. I agree. Sister Sufia asked what is making it difficult for us to embody this. And I named awareness of racism. But then, yes, if we keep going with what are some other challenges that women are facing, it is patriarchy, because patriarchy is invalidating their leadership and questioning every single strategic and short-term decision that a leader makes, until the board, largely our boards are led by men, until the board concedes and agrees. But I think that we, as a larger Muslim community, need to challenge patriarchy, because it is an embodiment of an inequity and an injustice that is not simply targeting women, but it challenges the viability and sustainability of our entire Muslim community. And yes, groupthink is a massive problem. So is silence and complicity.
If I could just add on this area of gender and sometimes the prevention of women leaders being able to really implement the things that they want to implement. In my study, and I framed it closely to yours, Dr. DeCuir, I had 14 women participants who lead Islamic schools, and one of the outcomes was that boards needed to do two things. One was be more inclusive of women and diversity in general, because there tended to be a lack of demographic diversity, and the ideology among the boards was very similar. So they similar backgrounds, similar thinking, which made it difficult for the largely female led schools. The boards are largely male. And we're not sure. I'm hoping ISLA will come up with some new numbers, but from my research and ISLA's research, about 80% of our principals are female, but our boards are about 70% male. So it creates a problem. And women are challenged when they want to do things differently, and sometimes prevented from doing that. So that is absolutely an issue. How we meet that challenge is going to be incumbent upon people who will stand up and be courageous and demand that things are done differently. But what we've noticed is that women who do stand up and challenge sometimes are removed from their positions. And
yes, please say that again for the people in the back. Because that is an unfortunate reality, and yes, it's an embodiment of the patriarchy.
Yes, we have seen, and Sister Sufia can, attest to this, through our work with Islamic schools around the country, is that when someone challenges, especially women, the authority, they are removed in the middle of the year, no warning. I would say it is a common practice for our boards. So inshallah, the board retreat that's coming up will help us really educate our boards on their responsibilities in the process, that there needs to be a process in place on how they deal with their school leaders. Thank you.
I know that we've come up to the hour. What I'd like to ask, if you have any final parting words, Dr. Amaarah or Sister Leila, if you want to then close out, inshallah.
I just say thank you. Thank you for creating a space to have leadership conversations. And I look forward to this organization having more conversations of leadership. I do believe it is a driver of change, both within our schools and for our community more broadly. So thank you for letting me be a part of this aspect of the conversation.
All right, Jazakumullah khair, everyone, for joining us today. Or tonight. I have to keep reminding myself that we're global. Alhamdulillah. Dr. Amaarah, thank you for your enlightening sharing of your research. And we look forward to seeing and hearing more from you in this journey, and hoping that you can give us some guidance on how we can work towards becoming a more equitable and just society that's really following the path of the Prophet ﷺ and the principles of our deen. Jazakallah khair, may Allah reward you for your work and bless you and continue to use you to help educate our community, inshallah. Everyone, Jazakumullah khair for joining. And
Imam Musa is
Dr.
raising
Sufia will, we have more.
Sorry, we have just Imam
Okay.
Musa. Imam Musa.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Wallah, it is so nice to hear from all of you, and I really benefited greatly. Just on the light note, hearing how our principals are working diligently in the schools, Islamic schools, and the struggle and the challenges that they face from the board that may not understand their efforts and intention and sincerity reflects so much on the imams also, trust me. So if we can somehow get imams on board to understand this, they could be a big support, and we can literally overcome this challenge that we are having collectively in the interest of educating our innocent kids and our congregants, inshallah. Wallahi, jazakallah khair for doing a fabulous job.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Imam Musa. I'm going to ask Brother Ahmed or Brother Akram, I see you're here. If you can make a final closing thought for us. Okay, I don't know if you heard me.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
Did you ask me a question?
I was asking if you'd make the closing dua for us, unless you have a question.
The only question I have is that, I wish everybody was as active as our sister Leila. And, what we lack in our capacity to be the best we can as leaders, as people who are directing others and being directed ourselves, is to think. I remember Sheikha Aisha Limu from Nigeria always said to us that in Muslim schools, the main focus should be to make sure that we have thinking children or thinking people for the future, because it's what Allah says in the Quran: reflect, ponder, and think. And if we don't think, then we can't learn, because it's questioning every word of the kalam of Allah. It's questioning everything that we hear from our brothers and sisters, in trying to get the best system going. We still haven't got the answers, the basic answers, which will create the sort of characters that we're looking for. I think Muslim schools around the world are doing a marvelous job, but as our Maulana Ali Adam from South Africa often says, Muslim schools today are still like rose petals on a dung heap. There's a lot more to be done. So inshallah, we'll all strive to share the good practice that Sister Shatara has shared with us, and do our best to continue the effort. We should remember never to stop on this path to learning what it is, because the Quran actually contains hidayah forever. And as Sheikh Ahmed Babika always reminds us, there is so much more in the Quran that we don't know. Every time some scientific discovery takes place, we look at the Quran and say, oh, that was in the Quran. So it's only afterwards that we realize the gift and the pearls of wisdom that there are in the Kalam of Allah. So we must always continue thinking, as Sister Sara says. Thank you very much. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you so much, Brother Akram, for that comment. Brother Ahmed, could you close us out, please?
Okay, Jazakumullah khairan. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين.